The California Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters was denied entry to a detention center in Los Angeles.
Ma'am, our lobby is secure right now to all visitors.
Excuse me, I need to get in.
Contact our public affairs office.
I need to get in.
The Congresswoman was trying to speak with David Huerta, the leader of the Service Employees International Union of California, yesterday. He was arrested by federal agents after prosecutors say he tried to obstruct their access to a worksite. He has called actions taken against protesters, and I'm quoting him now, an injustice. Joining us now on the phone is Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, take us through your attempt to get into that detention center. What were you told?
First of all, I went down into the area because David Huerta is a big leader in organized labor with SEIU, and everybody was wondering what happened to him. He was arrested. We did not know where he was, and so I went down to see if I could get some information. I had on one of my jackets with the emblem on it for the Congress, and I identified myself when I saw two people going in that looked like they were in authority, and I tried to ask them, I did ask them, if I could come in. I said, I'm Congresswoman Waters, and I'm coming to see if I can see about David Huerta. They said, we're not letting anybody in, and slammed the door. And so I didn't have an opportunity to talk with anybody, to see if I could find out if he was all right. Now, when I was there on the street right in front of the detention center, the protests were very small and very peaceful. There was no animosity. The only problem that we had was the National Guard, who was standing there with these assault weapons, in front of the small crowd that was there. And so that looked very, very dangerous. And I don't know why the National Guard was there with weapons, because ICE was in Los Angeles, in the black and brown communities, trying to grab people off the street, trying to identify who may be illegal, et cetera, et cetera. And so President Trump has literally instigated all of this. He knows that he cannot meet the numbers that he promised during the campaign, that he was going to send back to their country, send back to Mexico, et cetera. And so he's now playing to his MAGA crowd to say, see, I'm working hard. I'm going to get them out of here for you, on and on and on. He's not going to make the numbers, but he's going to upset our city. He's going to cause a great deal of problems. He is going to anger a lot of people. And then he's going to want martial law. We know what he wants. He wants to call martial law. He wants to get the military in here. This is a dishonorable human being, a cruel man that does not care about the disruption that he's causing and the lives that may be lost because of him. His son was quoted this morning saying to the Koreans, get on top of the rooftop and shoot the protesters.
Are you going to try to get into that detention center again, Congresswoman?
Well, no, I have to go to Washington. I am the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee dealing with trying to stop Trump from, stealing with this cryptocurrency. And so I'm leaving. I'm in the airport right now. And, people are calling me and telling me and describing, what was happening last night and concerned about my safety. Oh, no, I won't be back here until after Charlie Rangel's funeral in New York. After I go to Washington all week, I go to New York, yes. And so, but they were in my district. They were in Compton, and that's black and brown, and they really caused a lot of disturbance. They had no reason to go in the way that they're doing. Trump wants this to happen, and I am predicting that he will get the military in here, and he will create martial law to exercise his power and make it look as if he's doing everything that he promised to get rid of the migrants in our city.
I just want you to be safe and be careful out there when you get back out there after you come back to Washington and then go to New York. As you know, Congresswoman, the LAPD police chief, Jim McDonnell, says the level of violence he's been seeing across Los Angeles, in his word, and I'm quoting him now, is disgusting. Given that, why shouldn't the National Guard be involved?
Well, I was surprised at the way that the police chief was describing all of this. There have been no violence where anybody that was protesting hit anybody, shot anybody, threatened anybody. Nothing has happened. And so he doesn't know what to do, probably, because this is a sanctuary city and the police don't have the authority. All that he's got to do is work with the governor. The governor was not even called when he sent in the National Guard. The mayor was not even called. The president is initiating this purposely. He knows what he's doing. If he was, thinking, well, first of all, he started all this with the targeting, all of the migrants in the way that he's doing. And so, if we had people who were working together and cooperating, the governor would have been contacted, the mayor would have been contacted, and they would have said to the police, whatever the sanctuary city is, if we need to undo that at this time so that the police will have the authority, we can do that. But no, the president doesn't want that. He wants to use his power. And I am predicting he will go so far as to create martial law.
I just want to point out, and I'm sure you know this, Congresswoman, there has been some violence in the course of these protests. Some police officers were assaulted and some vehicles were damaged in the process. So there has been some violence out there, right?
Well, the thing about it is you may have people, one or two or a few people, who will not conform. That happens everywhere. That happens in our workplace. There's always someone who does something. But we are saying to people, don't be goaded. Don't be goaded into a confrontation. Don't be goaded into violence, because that's what Trump wants. He wants the violence so that he can send in the military and create martial law. That's what he wants. And if a few people were doing that, I've not heard of anybody being shot. I've not heard of anybody being killed. I've not heard of anybody being beaten. So I don't know what all this so-called violence is all about.
All right, Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California, thanks so much for joining us. And when you get back out there, stay safe. Thank you very much.
The National Guard is on the ground. Marines are ready to deploy. There have been multiple clashes with law enforcement and people have been arrested for violent acts. The president is urging the LA police chief to, quote, bring in the troops. How are you assessing the situation, John?
Well, this is a very difficult situation for LA because the city of LA, and most pointedly the LAPD, is caught in the middle here, even though it may not look like that on the screen. You know, what you had was, by bringing in the National Guard, what Tom Homan, the Trump administration, and the federal government were saying was, we have to have our immigration people, ICE agents, out on these raids looking for undocumented people. Why is that? That's because the pressure has been coming from the White House to ICE to increase from 1,100 a day to 1,600 a day to 3,000 a day, and without hitting these bigger targets, large factories and garment center locations, they're not going to get those numbers. Well, the LAPD is barred by California law by participating in those things. So the National Guard was sent basically to say, we'll protect the federal people with federal people because we're running out of agents. The problem came yesterday when the National Guard was behind the jail as they were bringing back the people that they had arrested on these ICE raids, and the crowd surged on the National Guard, and there was a very small number of National Guard, and there was a very large growing crowd. The LAPD moved in with California Highway Patrol basically to separate a crowd that was way too big for that number of National Guardsmen and a number of National Guardsmen who were armed with fully loaded assault weapons from an angry crowd. And of course the LAPD, as we have seen overnight and into this morning, has kind of borne the brunt of that, as you have immigration demonstrators worked in with anti-government demonstrators, mixed in with some anarchist groups and anti-government groups that lurk in the back of the crowds and egg them on and are probably responsible for more of the violence than the actual demonstrators who were there for protesting immigration. So it's a complicated thing when you have a city of 3.5 million people, thousands of demonstrators, and a police department that only has 8,000 cops, basically, and has stopped answering regular calls for service because they have most of their resources in the street dealing with this now.
As a former law enforcement official, what do you think the next step should be?
Well, I think what they're going to have to do, because the LAPD, based on its size, is going to be overwhelmed, is this is where the governor has to bring in more resources from the California Highway Patrol, CHP, which is in effect California's version of the state police. And they're going to have to do a lot of community outreach to the protest groups to kind of figure out who are the people behind the violence and the trouble, who are the core demonstrators concerned with the issue who want to protest peacefully, and how do they work with one of those groups and deal with the other.
John Miller, as always, thank you for your analysis.
Thanks.